Hey, this week on the 167, we're talking with Trudy George and Pastor Rick about the soundtracks that we play in our heads. It's going to be fantastic. Welcome to the 167.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Hey, welcome back to the 167. I'm here with Pastor Rick George
Good morning.
and the Trudy H.W.
What does that
George.
mean?
I don't know. It's like George Bush and H.W.
That's what I wondered.
I don't know your middle name, so trying to add
Ann.
some pizzazz.
A-N-N-E.
Trudy
E.
Annie George.
With an E.
Just Ann, but with an E. That's important to my mother. So be sure you don't mess that up.
Do you want me to put it on your little chyron on the bottom? I'll include
Yes.
All right, done.
Boom.
You guys should go over to YouTube and watch us on YouTube so you can actually see all of the visuals that we put into the podcast. So this week is going to be spectacular. So Trudy's joining us today because she gave the message this past Sunday, and I thought a fantastic message. I always love it when you bring the word. Not that I don't like it when you now I'm in an
No.
awkward position.
I'm just a lot funnier than him.
That
I
is-
can neither confirm nor deny this.
We should have a vote. So if you're voting online,
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
Oh,
are
there you
on the podcast on Apple Music, or if you are following us on Spotify or YouTube, just put it in the comment. Who do you think is funnier, Pastor Rick or Trudy? Trudy. So it was a great Sunday. We had Mother's Day here. It was a great celebration. We had some tea time for moms and things like that. Gave away some Legos. And
shockingly, that was the last gift taken. You know?
Listen.
Like, who would have ever thought that moms would have chosen anything other than a box of Legos?
A giant
It
box
was-
of Legos.
it was the flower Legos. And
Well, that's-
How long would it take to put that together?
for me or for like a typical human?
For a typical human, not for you.
I don't know, probably a couple hours.
A typical mom who hasn't touched
Couple of
Legos.
days.
Or
Well, what's probably going to happen is she's going to take it home and her kids are going to, quote unquote, help her put it together.
that's what I would have done.
That's what my kids do now. They'll get me a Lego set for my birthday or Christmas, and then they're like, here, Daddy, let me help you with that. And I just go, here's the pieces.
Okay.
I just find the pieces for them. They put it together.
But no, it was a great Sunday.
Well, and one of the things that we did was we did this video interview with, I think it was 7 moms, and they were kind of talking about the soundtracks that play in their head. And they were talking, which I thought was, I love that they're open and honesty and ways to process that. And I always love Stacey Boleen. I think she always has some good wisdom and cracks
She's
me up.
awesome.
But what were some of the things they were kind of talking about, the typical soundtracks that they kind of interact with as moms? What are some of the typical soundtracks that you see that come up over and over and over in ministry? Like when we're ministering to people, what are some of the soundtracks that we're either constantly combating or that we're trying to kind of put in their head, like incept into their head?
I think for me, probably the most common theme is my past failures are going to prohibit me from anything in the future. Like God can't use me because I did this, or it's just who I am, or whatever. So,
Yeah, getting over those past failures.
yep.
I kind of think Stacy and Kayla fit the two things that I would think about. Where Stacy's saying, if I did it all right, and I'm talking in regards to a mom, if I do it all right, then this is going to be the outcome. And then as seeing so many moms who have felt like they did it right, and it didn't produce the outcome that they had hoped. I think a lot of people stand on as a promise, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And I personally don't think that is a promise. It's a proverb. It's something that normally happens. But even if you think it normally, maybe not so normally anymore. But so that side of it, and then the other side of it, I'm so afraid. I'm so afraid of, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to do the wrong thing. I'm not going to pick the right, and for both of those, to me, the antidote is God loves my children more than I do. So it's not all on me. It's not all about me. God is a big part of this process, and he's the one who's ultimately in control.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say that he's the one they're going to, ultimately,
I think she needs a drink of your coffee.
I can't drink coffee. But I just haven't talked enough this morning. He's the one who's ultimately going to get them where they need to be. He's going to take all of our mistakes. He's going to take all of the things that we've done right, and he's the one who's going to redeem all of that. Yeah. I thought it was funny when Katie Ann, when she said, I was 19 and I didn't do it perfect. And I thought, I was 24, 28. I didn't do it perfect either. So it's not about the age, but we have this thing, I think, as moms, that we need to do it perfect.
Well, I feel like I was a product of that a little bit. Shout out to Kathy and Stan Motley. My parents were great. Like, I grew up in a 2-parent home. My dad was a pastor. Like, my mom worked really hard. She homeschooled, I think, my brother until like the 1st grade. And like, we grew up in a very small town. It was great. And I have no complaints. But at the time, I was, trouble. I was, she had 2 boys, so we were just kind of precocious. And I had a lot of angst about the church. And God was faithful through that. And I'm always wondering in that promise, it's like, well, when they're older, I'm like, how older? Because there's some times now that I have my own teenagers and small children that I literally just call my mom from the mall and I'm like, I'm so sorry because I know that I did this to you. And I'm like, and I remember having a very deep conversation with my dad in college because some distance had come between us. And I just said, oh, you're not perfect. Like, I realized that you were doing the best that you could and you were actually really looking out for me. And in my juvenile brain, I was not processing that very correctly. And I was, and so even when he's doing it well, I'm not interpreting that well because I'm a child.
Right.
And so it's just like one of those things where you can try and do it all perfect and your kids just are kids.
Right. Well, and I think, okay, this is how I think. If it were a promise that raise up your child in the way he should go, and when he was old, he will not depart from it. If that was a promise, then we would not have declining Christianity in the United States, right? Like we would continue to be growing. Right. Christianity would always continue to grow. So it's not a promise of God. We need to train our kids up, and then God will take care of what happens after that. Like, our job is just to train them up, and that he comes in and takes care of all the things that we did wrong.
Well, I think replacing those things with truth is probably one of the things that we probably encounter quite a bit in ministry. Is like, I'll talk to people in freedom or different things, and they'll it's almost platitudinal, where it's like, I think I've told this story before, but I remember I was in a group and somebody just said, I just don't feel like enough. And so instantly, you're enough, like, oh, you're great. And I'm like, no. Like, that's not truth. You're not enough. And it's like, I think that people are scared sometimes to confront the reality of, I feel like a failure. Well, you did fail,
right? But
your life's not over. Like, yes, you messed this up, but you have your whole life to fix this, or it's like, and so I think, sometimes people are so afraid of, at least for me, I think replacing some of the lies and the truth is, people think that because this one thing happened to me, my whole life is over, like you were saying. And it's going, not denying that happened, but going, yes, it did happen, but the grace of Jesus is here.
Yeah. So just, what happens in our minds, we think it just stays there, but it doesn't. It eventually comes out in the way we treat other people, the way we act, the way we involve ourselves in ministry. It's just those thoughts just get like cemented into our thought patterns, and it just dominates then our life. And so that's when you believe a lie, then you live the lie.
Right.
And the beauty, I think, of that panel was they were so open, they were so willing to share that combats the lie right there. Because I think one of the biggest lies of a woman is, I'm the only one. I'm the only one this has happened to. I'm the only. How many women I've talked to who say, if you knew what happened to me when I was young, and I'm like, if you knew that I'm the weirdo because nothing happened to me when I was young,
Yeah.
like we could break this mentality that I'm broken, soiled, terrible because someone did something to me when I was young. Like that would be broken if we even just admit the lies that the enemy is telling us.
I keep trying to teach my teenage girls that they're like, why can't we do this? And why can't we do this? I'm like, because I want you to be the only one of your friends that gets through their teenage years
Right.
and doesn't have this baggage,
Yeah.
But one of the things that you said, I thought that stood out to me and was really powerful, was you said most emotional experiences take 90 seconds. It's like that it kind of hits you, whether it's anger or grief or, or just like aggravation or whatever. And it's like, if you can get through that first 90 seconds without responding and you could pass things through the filter. And you took us to Philippians 4:8, which says, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. And you talked to us a little bit about being able that if something happens, you can just say no to it. You can say no to being angry. You can do those things. When you think about that, how does that work practically for me? So if I'm interacting with somebody cuts me off in traffic and I'm angry, whatever it's going to be, how do I do that in that moment?
So when you say when someone cuts you off in traffic, so that's easy because if you wait 90 seconds, right, for that emotion to pass, instead of getting super angry and giving them the finger and yelling at them, within 90 seconds, the odds are really great that you're going to be ahead of them right at the next stoplight. And
Hey, buddy.
No, that's not.
Or
no.
side by side.
yeah, you're side by side. It's like you went through all of that to cut me off just to be in the exact same spot that you are right now. So it's like 90 seconds later, you're like, oh, look, it really wasn't that big a deal. Right? So
I would think, 90 seconds is a long time.
Yeah.
So obviously we have to acknowledge that feeling right away. I guess I'll say I'm a reactor. I'm pretty chill most of the time. Like not that many things bother me, but there'll be the thing that comes up, and like learning to not say anything, learning to not just to let that feeling pass because of my personality. In 90 seconds I probably don't care anymore. I just go on to the next thing. But I think it's just a maturity level. It's just doing it. It's practicing it. It's understanding this is a feeling. And I always think of the one that I said, my kids back talk to me and I have this instant anger. And I don't know if I'm like most women, but I've talked to several who've had the same experience. I don't think I'd ever been angry until I had kids.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever felt that emotion before. And so it took me by surprise, and it took me time to even understand what was happening. I didn't always necessarily respond, especially at first, because I was so taken aback by, what is this? What am I feeling here? This is crazy. But just learning.
And their little cute little faces, and you're like, why am I so angry at you?
I know. What is this feeling coming from? It doesn't make any sense, really.
But the 90 seconds, not that it's a magical 90 seconds, but I think the 90 seconds allows us time to, and the two words that Trudy used, it allows us to respond instead of react. And when you respond, it's generally more thoughtful and productive. And when you react, it's more destructive. Right? So reaction, it hasn't processed through the filter, and it creates problems. So
See, where was this sermon when I had little kids? What I should have done is said, you get a 90-second timeout. Like if they do something, be like, Daddy needs 90 seconds. You're going to go sit in the corner. Just like,
or I'm going to go put myself in timeout for 90 seconds.
I don't know. I don't think that's real life, though. That sounds great, but that really isn't real life. And I don't think that even that's what the study was trying to say. I think what it was trying to say is whether this becomes this giant emergency or whether it becomes something that you deal civilly with, you have that choice. You may not be able to do that in that moment, you may not be able to respond correctly or do the right thing in that moment, but that's not the end. Then you have the choice as to what this becomes.
What you
how
do
big it
after
becomes.
90 seconds.
Right.
Well, I think I've quoted that here on the podcast before, but I remember a teacher saying, she said, anger is a wave, and you either let it pass over you or you ride it.
Yeah. And
just like-
the exact same thing. Yeah.
So, but I don't know if you guys relate to that at all. Like I said, with my own kids, sometimes it's like, I get like really angry because it's like they'll do something and I'm like, I can't believe, what you drop something. I'm like, oh, you broke this thing. And then then they start crying and I'm like, I'm angry that you did this thing. But now since you're crying because I lost my temper and I yelled at, now I have to comfort you and I'm still angry.
Right.
Just like, they're there. Daddy still loves you.
Right.
And just like, it's, aggravation because I'm just like, I want to be angry about this right now, but now I have to comfort you because you just did something to me. So it's always a complex situation.
I think looking back, as an older mom, looking back at the time of raising my kids, like I think a lot of that reaction, a lot of that, even the feeling coming, is because you're exhausted. Like you're in the midst of the battle. Like you don't have that time away to be able to focus and to connect to yourself. And so you are in the moment. And so I think we do react sometimes like that, or because of that, where now I can, like something breaks and it's like, okay,
Right.
Big deal. But then that breaking had nothing to do with that thing. It had to do with life is busy and complex. And it's, I think
It's probably why it's easier as grandparents to process that with your grandkids, because you have the time to recoup, to refresh, that they're not there 24/7 saying, Mom, 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 this isn't fair. This isn't fair. Why? It's like, I just did. So,
Well, and for some reason, as parents, we have this expectation that it's like, well, if I just do the right thing, this will never happen again.
right.
It's like, oh, no.
No.
So one of the other things that you talked about that I thought was really good, and so of course relates to our parenting and a lot of different things, but also our relationship to God, is you talked about the balance of why versus because I said so. Like that. It's like, it goes back to the why? Why do I have to do that? Why? And it's like, and eventually you just get tired of explaining yourself and you say, because I said so. And often I'll tell the girls, I'm like, because the Bible told you to honor your father and mother. This is what I'm telling you, and it's like, so, but we have that same relationship, I think, with God sometimes, where God's telling you to do something. You're like, why would that doesn't make any sense, God. Why would I do that? Why? And what is kind of, you've seen people struggle with, or what is the relationship you think in that balance of, because I don't think that we should just never ask God why, I think that we should seek to understand, but where do you see that balance play out in our spiritual lives? That balance of, hey, I will just do it because you told me to, God, versus, hey, I want to seek to understand what is the benefit to me in this.
I'll jump in. So I think the first step is obedience. Then comes, at some point, you can ask the why. The why should not come before the obedience. And the reason I think that's important is, and this is maybe a bad illustration, but if we're walking along the sidewalk and we're getting ready to cross the street, and I say, hey, stop, for you to keep walking and asking why as you continue to walk, well, then it's too late. The car hit you, and now we're in the midst of a trauma situation. Obedience is, okay, I will stop because you said stop. And now I can ask along, so why? Oh, you saw the car coming. I didn't see that. Well, now I understand, but it doesn't take the place of obedience, right? So obedience is first, and then as you walk in obedience, you can ask the why questions for clarification, right, to help you understand more.
That's a good picture. Like, do this, and then as I'm doing this with you, Dad. Why are we doing this? Here's why.
Yeah. So
we have been, like, we our Monday night Bible study, we did a deep dive into Revelation, and now we're in this deep dive into Adam to Noah. And honestly, just trying to think, why are we doing this? Why do we need to know this stuff? This is stuff like nobody's ever heard of before or in this way. Like, why do we need to know this? And we kind of came down to the whole idea, and I think it's the same thing with, like, it's like what Rick said, just tilted a little bit, but the idea of faith. The thing we have to please God is faith. Like, we don't have to have knowledge. We don't have to, God said, you will please me if you have faith. And I think that we can't always be saying why. A lot of times that will keep us from walking in faith. Like, if we know every detail, if we understand everything about everything, there is no faith. I'm not saying that we shouldn't deep dive, but we have to keep in mind as we deep dive, this is not about us understanding everything about God and everything about the Bible. And we had talked in, you had said something in step one, I guess, that I had heard before, that we have to embrace or be okay with the mystery of God, the mystery of Christianity. And the why sometimes can make us feel like there is no mystery because we know everything.
Right.
We want to know everything.
Right. And when you start getting the answers to all the whys, then you realize, well, there's still more questions to be asked, and I'll pursue more answers. And ultimately, what I believe that leads to is a sense of pride, right? That pride in myself that I can understand all there is to know about God. And once I know the answer to that, then I will be at this level. And you're never at that level. You're never going to be at the level of God. It doesn't mean you can't continue to learn and to dig and to explore things. And again, it's for clarification. Not it doesn't take the place of obedience. So, don't have, don't get drunk. Why? Okay, well, just don't do it.
Yeah.
Right. So now that you're walking, let me show you why. Like, I can give you examples, but just don't do it. Like, I don't have to explain everything. Right. So.
And sometimes it doesn't matter if you tell them why, because everybody thinks they're the exception to the rule. Well, that won't happen to me.
Yeah.
But I agree with that. Where it's
but statistically, not everyone can be the exception to the rule.
That's exactly right.
Right. So statistically, there has to be the rule.
If you are within the sound of my voice, I need you to know you are the rule.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, you should at least operate that way. But I agree with that. You and I were talking about the mystery and just those things where it's like we were talking about communion and baptism and things, and it's like I don't know. I don't know. God tells us to take communion, and it's like, and I don't know. I think that some people, they do what I used to call I don't know if the Dark Knight, it's like Batman Begins, the Dark Knight Rises. And the whole thing with that thing was, it was trying to make Batman believable. Because the whole thing about Batman is the mystique. He just appears out of nowhere and he does this. And so in that line of movies, they're like, well, it's because he owns a weapons company. And it's like they try to explain it all, right? And I think we start to do that with God. It's like, well, really, it's the psychological thing of going under the water and the water running down your face. And it's like you try and analyze it down to its minuscule thing and going, I don't know if it's the water or the profession or the act of doing it, the submission in obedience. It's probably a cake. It's not one of the ingredients.
Right.
It's the baking of the cake that makes it rise and makes it delicious. It's not just the sugar and it's not just the flour. It's all of it together. And I'm going, now I can dissect that down to all of its individual parts and deconstruct my faith, or I can say, I don't know, God asked me to do this and it brings me closer to him and there's a mystery in it. And, when you combine all those ingredients, it produces some kind of spiritual refreshing. It produces some kind of spiritual response.
And I think when we look at, like, our generation was, like, after you said why 2 times, it was because we said so.
Right.
Like, do it. And now gentle parenting, after they said why the 700th time, you're still explaining to them or trying to explain to them the why. And we can easily see that neither one of those is the right way to do it. Like there's problems with both of those things. And there's something in the middle of all of that. And I think it's the same way in our relationship with God. There's a time to say why. There's a time and to listen and expect God to answer. And there's a time just to do what he says.
Yeah.
And then as we mature or grow, he may or may not tell us what it is. But we can't live by faith and know everything about everything and understand everything about God, because then there's no faith.
But to your point, at least we wouldn't be hit by a car while we try to figure it out.
Exactly.
Yep.
So,
So you're saying our generation did it better by just saying, listen.
I'm saying I'm glad.
We heard what you said.
I'm saying that I'm glad that my parents raised me to where it was kind of like, hey, why? And they explained it very calmly to me. I'm like, why? I'm like, well, because if you don't, I'm going to punish you. It's like, oh, I got you.
Yeah.
Message received.
Yeah.
So
go get the switch, and I'll tell you why.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that was that wasn't yours.
That
That's
was
a little
your-
generational.
That was
That was
your
my
generation.
generation.
My parents didn't need any extra instrumentation. it was enough. But we have a couple minutes left. I was just wondering if there was anything that you didn't get to say at the end. I know you had gone through a couple of the words in Philippians 4. Was there anything that you just kind of want to leave us with? We got about 4 minutes.
I kind of was joking when I said 75 minutes, but I just like to take a verse and like understand all the things about it. So I didn't do a deep dive because I knew you guys weren't giving me 75 minutes. So
We got about 7 minutes.
I was a little disappointed, but I guess to leave us with, I think the crux of Philippians 4:8, the aha moment for me, was the idea that we dwell, we think about these things, we focus on these things, and it's not just to be a brain process, but it is the idea that it will change how we look at life. It will change how we respond to people. It will change how we see the circumstances around us, because we will do it in God's peace if we focus on those things. And I don't know if previously I had more considered it being a brain function. I have to keep my brain in the right place. But the action part of it was really for me that, okay, like that is the truth. The truth is, when I do the things that God tells me to do, and they're for my good, they are not because God's mean and he has all these expectations for me, but because he loves me so much that he wants me to live the best life I can live. And I think in our world, living the best life we can live means everything looks beautiful around us. Like God makes a way, we get the front row parking at the mall or, whatever.
The parking lot angel.
Right. That God makes the way and everything's beautiful and calm. And I know in my own life, when I look out at the circumstances around my life, they're not all beautiful. But in the midst of that, God loves me so much that he gives me peace. And I don't want to say that I don't believe God can change circumstances, because obviously he can. But he doesn't always change them immediately. Sometimes it's a process, and sometimes my expectation of what a circumstance should look like is not what God had planned, or what was supposed to happen. But I'll use the example of my dad. So we moved my parents in. We bought a home and moved in together. And how many years ago that was? 4 years ago. Like in our heads, we're doing this because we want our parents to just love their last years. Like they don't have to worry about anything about taking care of a home or whatever. They can just go do their thing and do whatever. And that never happened. My dad really was never well enough for that to happen. And he died a year after we bought the house. And so for me, like I could go into, we miss God. Was that right? Was that, instead of just living in the peace that the circumstance didn't look like what I expected it to, but I can live in peace regardless of what's going on around me or what has happened around me.
Yeah. So just asking the one question that starts in Philippians 4:8, whatsoever things are true. So just asking the one question, is this true? When you have that thought, the soundtrack starts. So whatever it is, I'm not enough, I'm going to fail, I'm going to mess this thing. Is that true? Just start there. And it eliminates most of the, no, that's not even true. Well,
Right.
then stop. Like if it's not true and you know it's not true, then you can move on. But we start to go down a road thinking something is true when it's a lie because we never stop to process, is this actually true?
Right. So come into agreement with a lie. Hey, we're going to do more soundtracks next week. Pastor Rick's going to be speaking, so we'll be back here at the 167. I hope you join us. Make sure you go to the comment section and tell me who you thought was funnier,
Me.
Rick or Trudy. We'll see you guys next time here in the 167. If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.